Welcome, everybody, to Common Ground Conversations. I'm Dr. Bonnie Nussbaum. This is Dr. JoNeil Conley, and we're here to talk to you about things that oftentimes don't get talked about, but once we talk about them, people go, that was so
Yeah.
good.
Yes, exactly. So before we even move forward, make sure you subscribe, forward this, share with your friends, because we know you're out there listening because we've heard from other people. But again, this is an important message that both of us feel very passionate about. The fact that, common ground, what does that look like? Because we have differing, Bonnie and I, we just had before
We
we
just had
started this.
one. Yes.
Oh, not a disagreement, but a conversation of two different sides of the coin.
And then as we worked our way through it, because we were willing to show up for each other
Yeah,
and see the conversation through, we arrived at that place of realizing we weren't saying anything different.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think if you take nothing else away from this conversation, remember that.
Mhm.
Stick with the conversation. And
And
I
be
think right now,
curious.
yeah,
Be curious. Oh, tell
yeah,
me more about that. Or I'm not quite getting what you're saying there.
yeah.
Can you help me understand? Yeah.
hmm Yeah. Well, we came up with about 10 things that we just wanted to toss out to have conversation about because we're filming this on February 2nd, 2026.
Happy
And
Groundhog's Day.
I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm sure it's hot shadow because it's really cold and nasty in Michigan and I'm sure in Wisconsin.
Actually, not.
Oh my
Spring's coming
word.
early.
I don't believe it for
Woohoo!
a minute. I don't believe it for
Hey,
a minute.
we'll fake it till yeah.
Exactly. But a couple things that people don't talk about. Number one, you're not crazy about having feelings of being on edge.
hmm If you're and if you're doubting whether or not you want to go out, like I don't want to go to the grocery store, I don't want to go to
Yeah.
church, I don't want to, if you're having nightmares about fighting with people, there's all these things that make you think, God, I must be nuts, but you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah. Because you think about what's happened in the pandemic, the economy, what's going on with the illegals, the culture, the leadership churn,
Okay,
and the
I'm going to back you up though. Let's not say illegals.
yeah, say yes, exactly. That's fine. But again, she catches my
Yeah,
grammar. This is what's going on in our country about alien,
right.
about all the whole nine yards.
Yes.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So,
Um, the other thing is algorithms of what we see. I'm not sure we can also always trust the algorithms.
well, and how much of this is bot driven? And
Yes,
the purpose is to stir dissent
yes,
because the more we're kept at each other's throats, the less we come together and talk about what do we want and how are we
bingo.
going to get there?
Bingo. And if you
Yeah.
notice, we just had a little bit of a conversation there where I said something, Bonnie said something, and I'm like, "You're absolutely right. We don't do this on purpose, but we
No.
try, but we try to demonstrate what it looks like, and we did that unintentionally. But good job.
And it works both ways. It absolutely
Yeah,
works both ways. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The second one, being loud doesn't mean right.
And oftentimes, the louder we get, it's really a signal of the more out of control we're getting.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure, for sure. So
And
keep
if you want to get someone to listen to you, get quieter.
hmm Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
So again, these are just little tidbits. This is the one we talk a lot about. The person across from you is not your enemy.
No.
And that's huge when we come to this issue of common ground.
Right.
At the end of the day, most of us want the same things.
Right.
We just have different thought processes, different views. But when we
Right.
take the time, and that does
Yes.
take time.
And to ask questions and to be curious. We all want to feel safe. We all want to feel like we can get ahead in the world. We all want to feel like we're valued.
Yes.
That's kind of across the board.
And Bonnie, who's going to be a grandma in a couple months, we want the world our grandchildren are coming into to be happy, healthy, and safe. There's something about that grandma thing that just changes the way you look at things.
Well,
But
and I think also because I've had several people say, why would they bring a child into this world? And my response is, how do we know that child isn't going to be the one to make a huge difference?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. This is another one. You don't have to agree to listen.
Hmm.
And we've always said, nope, not, don't want to. And that's just, we've discussed that many times about that active listening.
Well, one of the pieces that I think is so interesting, because this was certainly something I did all the time, was saying to people, well, I guess we'll have to agree to disagree.
Mm,
That's a cop out in a lot of ways,
yeah. Yeah.
as opposed to saying, help me understand where you're coming from with
Oh,
that.
that's my favorite line. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
And be willing to sit with the uneasiness and be willing to say, gosh, that's pushing me to think or be or do or hear differently. And most of us get really complacent and really comfortable in our own little spots, in our own little thoughts, in our own little stuff. And this,
And
what,
interestingly, yeah, there's been research that shows that when we've gotten on board with something and it begins to spin out of control,
mm-hmm.
if we've committed ourselves to that thing, we hang
Oh,
on to it tighter and
that's a really
tighter
good
and
point. That's,
tighter.
yeah.
So when you have someone in your world who just won't hear what you have to say, maybe make the assumption that they've agreed to that thing. So as it gets more spinning out of control, they're hanging
Yeah.
on even tighter.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Don't wait, as my grandmother would say, save your breath to cool your soup.
I like grandma. I like grandma. And I
Practical.
also
Yeah.
feel like it requires us to really look at where did those thoughts come from?
Yeah.
How did
Help
that
me
happen?
understand. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Instead of that, and we were having what prompted this a minute ago, our conversation was the issue of the amygdala hijack. And
Yes.
that since I operate a lot out of the polyvagal theory, and that the amygdala and that the ability to sense danger is what triggers and that you can't control it. But I think Bonnie's point was really well taken. So make your point, sister.
My point was that as we've done our work and as we have healed some of our old stuff, um, we can get to the point where we're removed from
Mhm.
the poke that typically would happen with that kind of stuff. And it might not be as easy to light us up like a Christmas tree anymore.
Yeah.
And what typically happens then is the other person may escalate because they're
Yes.
trying to pop us back into our old behavior. But
Yeah.
we can truly heal. We are not the victim of our
Yeah.
amygdala.
Yeah.
Don't give your
Yeah.
power away.
Exactly. And the other piece I think just slid through me was that sometimes those the individuals that want your reaction, they get a rush off of that. It's called,
Hmm.
and in narcissistic language, it's called narcissistic supply. But they're glad that you're riled up, and it makes them have this sense of where they
And if you
are.
think about them as being kind of like a vampire,
Yeah.
you don't want to be their donor.
No.
You don't want
No.
to be their donor.
No. Which is kind of the next thing on this list, that mockery is a shortcut. It avoids thinking. If you can make fun, or oh my God, they're just this or there's that, or the labels
Name
that I
calling.
was going
Yep.
to say, the labels we put on people,
Hmm.
it's a shortcut. That means you don't have to, I'm done. Look at, I've given them that. And that is the absolute antithesis of what we're talking about. We want
Right.
you to go ahead.
And to put a even stronger word to it, it's kind of a laziness. I'm not willing to engage. I'm not willing to do the hard work of
Hard work.
sitting with you and hearing what you have to say and seeing how that dovetails or not with what I believe
Yeah.
and stay present for a conversation. I can
Hmm.
just write you off as whatever.
Yes. Yes. That whole, right. Oh, you're just them. You're just, yeah, that whole
You're
labeling
too much
piece.
this, not enough that, whatever, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is one. Most people want the same thing. It's just framed differently. And
Yeah.
that's the piece that, if you go back to some of our earlier videos when we talked about the braver angel models, and
Hmm.
actually Bonnie and I walked through a situation about, what was it about? Was it gun control? I'm not sure, but it was talking about, we wanted our kids to be safe,
Right.
regardless of what, we both wanted the same thing.
That
And
the outcome, yes.
yeah,
How we were getting there was different.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And again, I'm not sure if that's a maturity or if it's a desire to want to find out about the other people. Maybe it's both. I
Hmm.
think you can't just write people off. And I see so many folks just writing
Yes.
them off, quote unquote.
And I think the unfortunate thing that happens is when we put a label on somebody, we make all kinds of assumptions about what that means. So if we put the label conservative on JoNeil and we put the label liberal on me, well, that must mean this, and this. And
Yeah.
it doesn't.
It
It
doesn't.
doesn't.
It doesn't. And it does. And it's quite refreshing to be able to have those viewpoints and find and to talk about them and to
Hmm.
be I'm going to use the word heard, but to be
Hmm.
heard. And
Hmm.
we're going to get to another in just a second about being calm, but it's very in affirming, I guess is the only word I can use, to be able to do that. Here's another one. You are allowed to set boundaries without dehumanizing the other person.
Right, right. And these days, it seems like the knee-jerk reaction when
Mhm.
something is said that crosses a boundary is that shaming, name calling, nasty
Yeah.
stuff instead of, okay, hang on a minute, you're stepping on my boundaries here. Let's talk through this.
Well, and I think the other piece, and this is a bit of a side here, is that we were talking about the algorithms, but the news and the Facebooks and the everything coming at you in the moment kind of thing. It was just that's really hard when you're like a ping pong ball. Oh, they said this and he
Right.
said this,
And
and
they're demanding response. They're demanding a
yes,
response. And we
yeah,
end up being, it's like whack-a-mole.
yes,
Boom, 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 boom. You're trying to, and we just take the step back. And to even, so my computer was in the shop for a whole
oh
day.
no, oh
I
no,
cannot tell you really how lovely that was.
hmm
There wasn't the onslaught of all of this stuff. Gift yourself with even an hour of turning off your phone and stepping away
hmm
from your computer, even an hour, and watch your nervous system kind of
hmm
ratchet down.
yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, Sunday morning I walked into my husband's he's got like a little nook. It's his TV. It's like his sanctuary kind of a thing. And it was Sunday morning, and normally he like watches the CBS, the Good Morning, all the things. And I went in there and he had Scooby Doo cartoon on. He said, "Something wrong in the news
Fabulous.
today? I'm going to Scooby Doo." I thought, good for him. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it was so cute because it was the time that it would normally be on. He goes, "No, not doing that
And
today."
and good for him knowing
Yeah.
himself well enough to
Oh,
realize,
that
need a
was that
timeout from
was
this.
that was so funny. Okay,
That
so
is
here we
funny.
go. You can be passionate without being cruel.
Yes. And I also think sometimes there's a movement to squelch people's passion
Hmm
because it can be uncomfortable for people. Think about Jesus. He was a
Yeah.
passionate dude, and
hmm
there were a whole lot of people who weren't very happy with him.
hmm hmm Well, Bonnie, you get passionate about your intentional community that
I do.
you do.
And
You
there
do.
are probably people who are like, oh, here she comes again.
Right.
Um, but the passion helps fuel the movement.
hmm Sure. Sure. And you're not cruel. You just know that this is something that
It's
needs to be
important.
done.
Yeah.
Important. Yeah. But there are people who get passionate to the point of unable to hear anything
Well, I
about
also think it's
anything.
interesting when you bring different cultures together.
Yeah.
Like the one that stands out in my mind is when you bring the Germans together with the Italians, and the Italians are, the hands are flying, and the Germans are kind of just sort of stoic,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
how uncomfortable they can be with each other. And
hmm
how do we begin to understand a different culture? Well, tell me about your culture. How do you do this?
Yeah. hmm
And
And
here's how
and
we do this.
and in
Yeah.
order to be able to ask that question, you have to suspend judgment.
Mhm.
You're
Like
not
there's
asked.
not a right way or a wrong way.
Yeah,
There's
it just
multiple ways, and that's what makes life interesting.
yeah, yeah.
We all
And
do it
we've
the same way.
gotten
It's boring.
and I think people get entrenched with what they think they know to be the truth or what they believe or what they've heard, and they're just
Hmm.
not willing for any other option to be even considered. And I'm all about, well, let's consider all the options.
Right.
Let's look at all the,
And if you're face to face with someone who's like that, nope, it's got to be this way, maybe just consider yourself the Johnny Appleseed of opportunities. You're just
yeah.
planting a few seeds and then let it
Mhm.
go and
Yeah.
see what happens.
Yeah. And then this last one, I think is so important. Calm is not weakness.
No. And there are those who are really good. I mean, I think, regardless of your politics, I think Barack Obama was very good at not being provoked.
hmm hmm
And I admire his ability to do that because I don't have that same level of capacity
Well, welcome
yet.
to our world. Welcome to
Yes.
our world.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. And I do think I think it can be learned.
Hmm.
It
Practiced.
can it
Yes.
can be practiced, it can be learned, it can be I think I've used the example before. My friend Pam, when we would teach and somebody would say something provocative, she would always do, hmm, let me think about that. And whatever that looks like for you. So I every now and again I find myself doing a Pam Porter. I
There you go.
wonder,
Hmm.
whatever that looks like for you. And make sure that you're not saying, well, in order for me to be strong, I have to be right, I have to be this, I have to be that. You don't have to be nothing.
No,
You
no.
don't have
I
to
was
be.
just reading an interesting thing in a book that I'm reading where um, Socrates was talking to two generals, opposing generals,
Mm,
and asking them about courage and their definitions of courage. And everything that they would present to him as a definition, he could find the flaw in
yeah.
there. What it did was it left them thinking, pondering, trying to figure out, okay, so exactly what is courage? He didn't poo-poo what they were saying. He
Yeah.
merely opened the door for more discussion. And I think that
hmm
can be a useful tool to know how to utilize.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I guess as we've looked back on this year that we've been doing these common ground conversations, we started with family dinners and now we're into like the world peace kind of spaces. But it's the exact same concepts. It's the
Absolutely. They're very
exact
connected. Very
same
connected.
concepts. So Bonnie, you feel like you can wrap this all up here with a final thoughts?
Even if you want to practice, pick one of these. Pick one of these and make it a conscious choice that you're going to practice something different. I would also recommend practice with someone who may get it and may go along with you in terms of, hey, I want to practice. Don't start with the person who drives you up the wall, across the ceiling, and down the other side.
Mm-hmm.
Practice with someone where you can get a bit of confidence in, okay, here's how I do this, and here's how I don't take the bait,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then begin to move into, I'd like to try a conversation with the person who
Mm-hmm.
usually drives me wild.
Yeah. And my mother always used to say, I walk a mile in somebody else's moccasins,
Hmm.
before
Hmm.
And I heard another line the other day about what's going on. It says, never take down a fence until you know why it was built. Figure out before you're going to go knock down people and their thoughts and their feelings and their beliefs, understand where they're at and
Where that
where
came
they're
from.
where
Hmm.
that came from. And 9 times out of 10, they feel very justified. Well, this happened and this happened, and we don't even give them the grace of the moment of saying, "Wow, I wonder what it would have how I might have reacted in that circumstance."
Well, and interestingly, I mean, I think about this in terms of various family members. Despite they're not being in certain circumstances, they don't really understand the dire straits that
hmm
some people find
Yeah,
themselves in, and to again allow the
yeah.
grace for people who are struggling and
hmm
struggling mightily.
hmm hmm So thanks, folks, for being with us for this common ground conversation. We kind of went off a bit of our normal script to do something. We don't even know what our script's going to be when we start to sit down
No, we
for
wing
this.
it a lot.
We we wing it, but I think you realize we're speaking from our hearts when we're talking to.
Right. Yes, and that this is stuff that we feel deeply about.
Yeah.
We really want to, yeah, I mean, even if you were to take a piece of what we talked about, any one of those things that JoNeil listed, and go talk to somebody about it. Hey, they were talking about this, and I think they're all wet because fabulous. Have a
Yeah.
conversation with someone about it. That would be great.
Real good. And we'll see you in a couple. We do this every 2 weeks. So look for us in a couple weeks and you'll see us on Common Ground Conversation.
Yep. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.